Commission. Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mayor.
Please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we ask that you be with us during our meeting today, bless those in attendance. We ask for a safe 4th of July this year. Be with those that are shooting off their fireworks, and be with them and make sure they're safe. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Okay, we've got okay, we need approval of the minutes. Is there any corrections? If not, they stand approved as submitted. That was the July 18th meeting. June 18th, excuse me. At this time, we have public comment. This is we ask that you, if you want to speak, come before us and state your name. And we have one person here today, Mr. Gosha. You're on.
Good afternoon.
You want to state your full name?
Bob Gosha.
Okay. Go ahead.
And I'm here to ask you folks, I was gonna have my property cleaned up by this past weekend. And Friday morning, I was in an accident, and my pickup was totaled, and I need another couple days or so to get my stuff. I got some 2x4s to haul off and an old lawnmower, and I'll get my stitches out like next Wednesday. And if I can get a week or two or something, I'll get everything out of the way.
Well, I think anybody that's been through what you have,
Pardon me?
I said anybody that's been through what you have, I think needs a little extra time. So what's the time frame? What was it? Do you know?
I believe it was this past before he got in his accident, and so I think 10 days from today would be appropriate.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable,
Is that-
sir?
Does 10 days sound
10 days.
reasonable?
10 days
From
from today.
Okay. That'd be
Is that
fine.
all right?
That'd be fine.
I don't think we don't have
Do we need
to
a
vote on
motion,
that,
or-
do we? Or do we?
You've already passed a resolution to abate this. The opportunity for public hearing is passed. I think at this point in time, we just would commit to delaying the, either
Date.
contract, by contract abating the nuisance or our own staff abating the nuisance. We just delay that by another 10 days. We can administratively handle that.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you for coming up.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else that's not on the agenda that'd like to speak? Okay. Beth?
Good afternoon. My name is Beth Coxall, and I'm with Live Well Finney County. I'm here to speak with you about the upcoming Southwest Kansas Opioid Summit. In 2018, St. Catherine Hospital in Live Well Finney County hosted a Finney County Opioid Summit. The summit was held at St. Catherine Hospital and had over 100 local participants. For the 2019 summit, we've opened it up to all of Southwest Kansas. We did this because following last year's summit, we started an opioid task force, and the task force includes representatives from the Garden City Police Department, Finney County Sheriff, Finney County Corrections, EMS, USD 457, St. Catherine Hospital, Genesis Family Health, Compass Behavioral Health, and Live Well Finney County. And working together, we're working in the areas of law enforcement, prevention education, healthcare, treatment, and communications. So we're hosting a 2019 Southwest Kansas Opioid Summit on July 24th, and the summit will be held at Garden City High School. Dr. Lee Norman, Secretary of KDHE, will be opening the summit for us, and our keynote speakers include Derek Schmidt, Kansas Attorney General, and Gail Box of the Austin Box 12 Foundation. We'll have several different breakout sessions as we've kind of tracked it to go law enforcement, healthcare, and then community and prevention. So the breakout sessions will include the educational program, Too Good for Drugs. KDHE will be here to talk about their prevention efforts across Kansas. There'll be a session on Suboxone. Ellis County Drug Court will be here to talk about what they've implemented in Hayes. There'll be a law enforcement roundtable. Centura Health will be presenting on their ALTO program, which is Alternatives to Opioids. K-Trax will be presenting on that pharmaceutical-based tracking program, and then we'll have a session on adverse childhood experiences. So registration is free, there'll be lunch included, and we would like to invite all of you guys to join us for a fun-filled day of learning.
What time is that?
It starts at 9, registration will
9.
start at 8, and I can see if Matt can forward out the registration link to you.
Okay.
And how long
Thank
does
you.
it
It
run
will
for?
end at 3.
At 3? Okay.
Yep, and there will be CEUs available if you need those for nursing and anybody credentialed through BSRB.
How about
Don't
architects?
ask me what that stands for because
Yes,
I
for
cannot
architects, there's a
remember.
special.
Yeah. Could architects attend that and get a credit? I wonder?
You can, I don't know, you can credential yourself for that.
Oh,
Any other
Well,
questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? It's not on the agenda.
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Tim Fields. I'm the pastor of Turning Point Church of the Nazarene, and appreciate you giving me this moment. I would love to address this governing body on the subject of child care or daycare. Obviously, there's a daycare shortage of available spots in Garden City. I've heard everything from 750 to 1,100 spots that are needed. Regardless which number you pick, there's an economic impacting need in our community. The HR director from a major corporation told me that they'd flown someone in to interview for a skilled, high-paying job. She accepted the job, but when she flew back the second time to find housing and a daycare position for her child, having a difficult time with housing, but she did finally find a place. She found no place for daycare and had no hope or promise of a daycare position. The lady then told the HR person that she would love to have the job, but without adequate daycare, she would have to refuse the job, which she did, immediately affecting our tax base. So whether it's from a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, they could have provided a daycare position for the child, and thereby the city's economic tax basis being affected in a positive way. I realize through a study has been done for the daycare organizations using Kansas City and other places as their basis point, but in my last church, and a lot of people do not know this, but in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, our church felt the need also to help in our community by starting a daycare center, which we did. The center housed 84 children and successfully ran for my remaining time there, and after I left, of course, but I was there for 14 more years. I'm very fully aware of what it takes to prepare, to start, and to maintain a successful daycare center. And 5 years ago, Turning Point Church built a children's building suited for community outreach and also to house a daycare center, building it to code. And recently, all the state approvals and all the requirements have been met. And right now, all we need to do is look to hire a director. But in a town with a shortage of daycare centers, that also constitutes you have a shortage of potential qualified daycare directors. There's obvious reasons for that, and one which we just stated, very few operational functional daycares, especially on a large basis other than home centers, provides a very small pool of people who are qualified to run for it. Someone running the home center can actually make more money than an organization that operates on a very thin margin, which translates usually to lower pay. And to create a stable, high-quality daycare center, you had to have a stable, long-term, qualified director, as well as workers to be maintained in order to keep the integrity of the organization. The problem is the pay competitive wages, you have to raise the rate for each child care spot. And doing so then limits who can afford it, thereby drives many of the people to underground illegal situations, and for safety reasons, none of us would like that at all. The going daycare director's rate of pay in Garden City is about $6,000 a year lower than starting positions at Menards, and $9,000 less than that of Tyson's, not including the benefits, nor requiring the educational requirements. The quickest and best way to make an immediate impact on this community would to be empower centers to be able to pay higher wages to their staff. Usually, with no exceptions, grant monies can never be used to pay for payroll purposes only. So for economic impact purposes, I believe and suggest some of the closing funds or incentive funds should be directed to empower centers to open, Angel Academy being one of those we'll speak about today. Yet I believe there also will be others that would follow suit if we get help. So what's needed? I believe two things. One, I would be willing to be part of a coalition to seek out other nonprofits and other people, organizations, or buildings that can be readily adapted for daycare centers. And number two, for Angel Academy, ready to open 89 spots, to ready to open as soon as possible, as soon as we can keep competitive rates for not only the director, but for the staff. To pay staff what's been currently in our town, barely above minimum wage, and then there's constantly turnover in it. That's what constitutes some of our problem, the lack of instructional classes, which our college is going to start back up in August, which I'm appreciative of that, to be able to have certifications. But again, for the youthfulness and maturity, and especially the large organizations, it takes a lot to find the right people. So I offer one immediate solution on here, and I gave, hopefully all of you have copies of that, but a 3-year plan to be reviewed after the first 3 years, possibly extending it to 5 years, investing in Angel Academy for right now to start off, to help with salaries, $48,000 a year. That's just one suggestion that we have.
Okay. Appreciate you coming before us, and we'll
Thank you.
definitely consider that.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else? Not, we'll move on.
Item 6A, the governing body is asked to consider and approve renaming the Central Fire Station to be named Alan Shelton Central Fire Station, honoring his 44 years of dedication and service to the city of Garden City. So I would
It's
ask.
with great honor and that I make a motion that we approve the renaming of the Central Fire Station to be named the Alan Shelton Central Fire Station.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we name the Central Fire Station the Alan Shelton Central Station?
Central Fire Station.
Central Fire Station. And any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Been trying to quit crying. No, when something else happens, but Mayor, City Commission, I'm very honored that the Central Fire Station will bear my name, and there's no words to express how grateful I am. I am very grateful. And thank you all very much. The City of Garden City has been
fantastic to me over the last 44 years as citizens, especially my department, my command staff that's especially here today. Just a great place to work and live and work. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is the name, what, we've got to order the letters?
Yeah, so if anybody knows where we can find those letters, that'd help. Yeah, I think I visited with Chief about how he wanted his name presented, and I think he was, his favorite of the options that we talked about was the one that was in this picture. So that's how we hope for it to look when it's all said and done. Again, we need to, that was photoshopped a little bit, so. So we'll need to figure out how to match those letters, but that shouldn't be too hard of a task. There'll also be on the other side, I believe there's an indication, or no, it just says GCFD on the other side of the building, I guess. So, yeah, this is the only place we need to put that up there. Also, we'll figure out something to put inside the building as well that indicates that when folks walk in. So, yeah.
Good deal.
Thanks to
Thank
Chief
you.
for the years of service for sure. Thanks to the commission for allowing us to push this a little early with confidence and making a surprise at the retirement. So yeah, I think it was neat. She said he was surprised.
Well, thank you for your
Thank you.
service.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for manager's report. Is that right? We're in receipt of the final draft of the organizational study. It's out on the website, the city's general website, and also the police department website. You were presented the findings and recommendations at a June 18th pre-meeting workshop. Earlier that morning, the police staff was presented the information as well. There were a few minor changes before they went to print, so to speak. And so we received that final document later in the week. There's two staff reports in there, one from the police department and the other from service and finance. If you have any questions on those, we'd be happy to try to answer them for you. Meetings of note. I believe there's a parade on Thursday. Is there a commissioner something or other? Okay. All right.
Matt, how about you? You could ride in it.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'd like to see you in that little soul.
That little kid. My head popping out like grape juice. So,
I can barely fit in.
if there's no question, no questions or worthwhile comments on the we'll move on to the consideration of the appropriation ordinance. If approved, it would be ordinance number 2486-2019A.
I'd like to make the, sorry, I was trying to clear my throat. I'd like to make a motion to approve the appropriations ordinance as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the appropriations ordinance 2486-2019A. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
There's no ordinances or resolutions. There's also no old business. So item 12A, the governing body is asked to consider a replat and a right-of-way street dedication for the Notting Hill duplexes and an amendment to the development agreement.
You want to
Caleb?
handle that?
You have the complete staff reports in your packets in regards to this request that went before the Planning Commission at their June 20th, 2019 meeting. It was voted unanimously by all the planning commissioners, approval of the plat, and as such, we've made the amendment to development agreement as well. What they're requesting to do is this started off as a private development with a private street right-of-way. We're now dedicating the street right-of-way, and the property, the road would then become the property of the city to maintain and take care of after that point. And you have in your staff report the details of that request. It'd be a 31-foot right-of-way. By doing so, there is also some inherent nonconformities that would be created with this. That was also considered by the Planning Commission and recommended for you on that. Staff also requires that the developer amend the current development agreement, identifying the variances and when the city would take ownership of the street. Like all properties, the owners are responsible for the right-of-way behind the back of curb. The homeowners association would be responsible for everything behind the back of curb, which includes private property behind the curb, the cul-de-sac, property behind the curb on the north and south side for the maintenance of the fence. And the agreement should spell out the 1-year maintenance warranty of the street and maintenance bond for infrastructure cost with the date the city would take ownership of the street, the maintenance of the property behind the back of curb, and the maintenance of the fence to be done by the homeowners association. So there will be, if you look at the plat itself, it's a cul-de-sac. So in the center of the cul-de-sac will be an area that will have some area of landscaping or beautification that could be done that would be maintained by the homeowners association. Part of the drainage is in the right-of-way, which would also be maintained by the homeowners association as well. And so, any questions?
I have questions.
Yes.
So, and I think maybe you could explain maybe the nuance or more of the conversation that came out in the Planning Commission that I wasn't able to glean from just reading through the report. Maybe there were extenuating circumstances or something that I didn't completely understand. But so this was built as a private development. It was intended as a private development, and so that's why the standard that we would set for a public street was not met, because it was like, well, it's going to be private anyway.
Yes.
Then after the fact decided, oh, we do want the city to take over this, yet it still doesn't meet our standard.
Correct.
Because of the width. So my concern, I guess, is there some extenuating circumstance that why this should be considered versus why this shouldn't be a practice for others going forward, or what was it about this particular property or something that lent to this occurring?
Yeah, this is one of staff's concerns as you move forward with any going from public to private on public right-of-way, where then the taxpayers' dollars then go to maintain it when it was initially developed as to be private. It was developed to meet city standards, so we did do the inspections of the street, so it does meet the city standards, whereas other times, those private streets and improvements don't meet the city standards or specifications. And so that is one thing that we did do differently on this, is that we did do the inspections of the road right-of-way. There is an inherent expense to that, just with any other development of maintenance of roads and so forth into the future. That is part of that cost that is there. The developer is fully aware that if it doesn't get approved, that it would still stay private, and that it would be a homeowners association maintained street and right of way. And so that's the developer's aware of that. They are requesting that it become a public right-of-way, and that the city then take over the maintenance and that after that 1-year maintenance time frame is over. So that is, for staff, that is somewhat of a concern, because if you start off that way, then and you change that could be a concern, because those are additional maintenance costs that the city would overtake over the years. So,
Is there a particular reason why you made this request at this juncture?
The only reason we've done that, as in the middle when we started this construction, we didn't have another project that we're getting ready to build 220 units on the west side of town. So, and we were under the impression when we met first time with the city staff that either we're gonna have it as a gated community, and then we find out we couldn't do that due to the fire trucks that they need to come in and out. So that's why we decided in the middle of all of this to switch it, that we can turn it over to the city. And we said, we'll maintain it for a year to be sure it meets your standard and there's no issues with it. So I think, as we talked to the city staff, it was about the parking, which we understand that, and we're gonna put that in the homeowner association, that they can park in the driveway to meet that requirement. So really, it's the width of the street, and in the circle that we decided to design, there, we were trying to do something new for the city. It's all landscaped, and we said we're gonna put that in the homeowner association to be taken care of. It won't be part of the city responsibility. So it's really, we shifted gears in the last year as we're trying to build them, and we're hoping that the city will help us adopt the road, so that will help us.
So it was all just decisions you made in designing and planning after the fact, and now we're trying to kind of make up the difference there.
So, and it still does meet the requirements for like the fire and the city, the size of the street for fire trucks on those, is that
Yes,
correct?
yeah,
Okay,
there's no issues with that, because whether it was private or public.
They still have to follow those,
it's-
okay, yeah.
It's still the same.
because there are places in the community that, I mean, if a fire truck had to get down, I have no idea how they would do it. The streets are so narrow, if you park on the street.
Yeah, there is no parking on this street. That's part of the agreement, is that there is no parking on the street. So that is definitely those things that you just weigh out as far as this project goes. Right now, all of the land is in one parcel. So all the land where the homes are located is one parcel, and the road is one parcel. So basically, that's how it's going to be. They have requested that possibly splitting those lots up in the future, whether condominiumizing them or finding some other way. There would have to be variances granted for that, because by adopting the street like this, it creates issues because it doesn't meet the current
It
requirements.
creates setback
And
issues.
that would be I guess the concern is in the future is you go in as private, not meeting, and then you come back, then it creates a problem because now we have nonconformities. But that's something you have to consider when making this determination. And so you have staff's recommendation, you have the planning commission's recommendation on there, and we've have the development agreement that has been modified based on those plans. This project was an MIH grant project as well, so any changes as well, we have to go through the state approval process to make sure they're good with that, because there was grant funding from the state on that as well. And so far for this, with the road going private, they're fine either way with that. There may be issues later if they want to divide it up in any way, that they have to get state approval.
So are we following the order we should? Should be state approval first and then this, or is this the first step and then? state
We've already
approval?
checked with the state regarding the street right of way. They will, if they want to split up the lots any further, we'll have to go to the state and make sure that that's okay with the state, because it is a grant funded project.
Yeah, I do want to note that the mayor has stepped down from the discussion, so.
One of the things we've done, we went and talked to our neighbor there at the hotel, and he allowed us to move our fence as far as we can on his property, so we're getting an easement from him. And actually, the other thing is, we decided we're gonna help him. He got a broken sign and different things, so we're gonna help re-landscape that area, which is gonna help our development too. So we're looking at even our neighbor's side of it, which is gonna help both of us. A driver drove over his sign, so we're gonna tear it up and clean that. We'll clean some of this concrete, but with our investment of the new project, we figured it made sense for us to go ahead and switch from having it as a rental to sell it. And we're working with the state on the funding they gave us is for the 3 units. So, but I can't move or do anything till we figure out what we're gonna do with the road for me to even market it, because that's gonna be depending on how we're gonna apply it. So today is a pretty important day for us to kind of see what would you guys allow me to do.
Yeah, and I think, the concern is not with the need for these properties, it's not with my concern, I speak for myself. My concern is not with the validity of the development, it's good. It's just, how do we present going forward to other developers a uniform code of these are the rules, and these are our expectations and those kind of things. And then but understanding that if there are extenuating circumstances that are germane just to this, understanding all of those. And that's why I was wondering if there was a little bit more that, was said in the planning commission, because they did have a unanimous approval. And then I just was trying to kind of get at that issue solely. I recognize, I appreciate good landscaping, I really do. I appreciate a nice new housing development, I really do. It's just, how do we make the field, even for everybody else, the expectation set? I think that's, as we talk about all of the ordinances, whether we're talking about our, our business license ordinance and those kind of things, it's just what are the rules, and so people have appropriate expectations. That was what my question was getting at. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the replat with the street dedication and amendments to the development agreement.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this issue? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And you were an aye or a nay on that?
No, I was an aye.
Aye, so 3-1. See when step down, see what did you just ask?
Yes.
Oh, you were here for this one, okay. I thought you were.
Are you allowed to step down, Seelin? You recuse yourself at times?
Carefully.
Thanks.
Okay. What do we,
So the next item, 12B, the governing body, well, should we wait for?
what's it? Oh, I
He
must
may
be
be
having
having
some problems.
Technical problems.
We got the IT guy.
No, that's- Good to go?
Yes,
All
I'm
right.
sorry. Yeah, I
No
was
problem.
locked out. so-
12B, the governing body is asked to consider and approve the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan to the Western Area Power Administration. Mike?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. The Garden City receives an allocation of 2 megawatts of power from the Western Area Power Administration. They're a federal power resource. We've received an allocation from Western, it's referred to as Western or WAPA, since the 1970s. However, prior to that, our allocation was handled by the Sunflower Electric Power Corporation. When we changed power providers, Garden City was responsible to do this Integrated Resource Plan, IRP. We did it in 2014, and now it's time to do a 5-year renewal. What they're looking for is they want to make sure that the city is looking at all the different necessary resources to provide power for our community, as well as they want to know what kind of resources we look at, whether it's additional generation. The resources could be hydro, could be solar, could, any kind of renewable energy, natural gas. They want to know what kind of incentives we have done for, to conserve energy within the organization. So based upon all of that, the IRP the whole thing is in your packet there. You can take a look at that. What we've done since January of 2014 is the Jamison Energy Center was constructed and put online. And as a peaking resource, both for the city and both for the Southwest Power Pool. Additional generation was purchased from the Dogwood Energy Facility. That's a natural gas facility. We purchased an allocation of wind energy out of the Buckeye Wind Farm, and we currently receive about 22% of our other requirements through the Southwest Power Pool. And that comes as a variety of mixtures of different resources. In 2015-16, the city, we changed all of our old street lighting networks from the high-pressure sodium and mercury vapor to the more efficient LED lighting. We also were recognized in the American Public Power Association as an RP3 community that provides reliable, safe electric power to the community and demonstrating proficiency in reliable safety, workforce development, and system improvements, all of which are required by the Western Area Power Administration to agree to extend this contract out. The contract actually goes until 2056, so it's a long time, but if you don't do the hoops that they want us to do, then they can certainly take that back. And I'm happy to answer any questions on any of that or any of our resources.
Well, so I thought it was interesting. So I know that we're recently entered into an agreement where we're, changing how we receive power from Sunflower. And so how is that going to be mixed in with this? Or is it already kind of in the mix with this?
To answer your question, we're going through we're right now in the middle of putting together an asset purchase agreement with Wheatland Electric and Sunflower Electric, where Garden City is going to purchase some of the substation acquisitions from Wheatland, which will give Garden City direct connection to the bulk transmission system. So as part of that, we will no longer be taking power through Wheatland. It'll come directly to the city from the transmission source. With that, the Jameson Energy Center, before we were restricted on how much we could generate, how much we could push out through the Morris substation, which we're in the process of purchasing, but in those negotiations, Wheatland has agreed to increase that threshold so we can actually have more power flow through there than what we had before. Therefore, it's not necessary to run the Jameson Energy Center as much as we have in the past for our own needs. However, we're still called on a regular basis. We were called on 3 days last week by the Southwest Power Pool to run those units. And they can call on us for economics to where it's cheaper to run our units than it is for them to run other units. Or it could be that they just want us to be online for voltage support of the transmission system. And once SPP calls, you need to answer that. We told them our stuff is available, and it is. There are times when we save considerable amount of money by running those. There are times we make money by running those from SPP. And then there are times in the past where we had to run them because of our restrictions where it actually cost us money. So in the long run, I hope that answers your question. In the long run, the purchase of Wheatland's facilities will be a huge benefit for the city. And
Well, and I appreciate that you're explaining Jameson Energy, how that works, because there's sometimes that people think that we are not running it, and so I'm glad to understand a little bit more of how it's used and when it's used and why it's used, and sometimes costing us money isn't where we want to go, but
Yeah.
if you're called on, like you said, it's a call you have to answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other
So is
questions?
WAPA looking for more alternative energy for the next 5 years in the plan? I noticed we added more alternative energy resources, but is that something that they're really that they wanted us to focus on, or is that what we're focusing on? Or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
In Washington, the previous administration had certain environmental levels set that encouraged people to do more renewables. That direction has been taken by almost every source in the United States. The current administration has lowered that threshold some, but it hasn't really made any difference. Western, their power is hydro, so they're all for renewables, and they prefer that you continue to do that. We look at all sources. This last round, we looked at renewables, we've looked at coal, we've looked at nuclear, believe it or not, and more gas. And renewables, right now, wind and solar is the cheapest energy you can purchase on the market. So that's the direction that we're headed to right now, and hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Okay.
I make a motion, we approve the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan for Western Area Power Administration. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Item 12C, the governing body is asked to consider and approve the removal of the perimeter fence on Bellevue Avenue from Main Street to 3rd Street at Valley View Cemetery. Andy?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Back again for another section much earlier than anticipated. We went out to bid on the cemetery irrigation project. We'll be bringing that to you at the next meeting. And during that process, we found that it's a better for installation for the contractor on the cemetery irrigation project as we move forward to be able to move it now so they can work in and among that area. We were planning on coming to you when the sidewalk is going to come through in 2021, but it's a better situation to do it now for the project coming forward. So we're asking for the permission to remove that at a staff level.
So Andy, I had a resident was asking me, so what are we doing with all of that? I mean, are we reusing it? Are we throwing it away? And I said, I would be glad to ask and bring that up. I said, I didn't know, but I'm sure that we're going to take care of any resource we had. We'd take good care of it, so.
Right now, on the 3rd Street wall, we have it sitting in the materials yard in the northwest
To be used.
corner. We'll go in and knock the concrete off of that and stockpile it if it needs to be used again somewhere else. The mesh has to be evaluated. Is it worth using again? Because over time, the bottom of the mesh gets torn up by mowers over however many years it's been used. So the answer is yes and no.
Okay, well, no, I appreciate that. I said I didn't know, but I had assumed that we would, and I indicated I would ask, so thank you.
With the removal of the fence and looking to the future of adding the sidewalk, is there a possibility of, with the new irrigation system and the sidewalk, is there a possibility if we come back or a future commission comes back and wants to install a fence, can they install it in that area?
Yeah,
without going through the irrigation system? Or-
Yeah, we can
okay.
make that work.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not putting, in a future,
Right.
somebody says, hey, we really want a fence back there, and then we have to move the irrigation system or kind
Right.
of work our way around it instead of putting holes through a
Well, I'm glad you brought
irrigation
that up
system or
because then
something.
when we actually come and put the path through there, then we'll take that in consideration and make sure we're not slamming it right against everything
Okay.
and leave a little bit of a buffer. And still meet what we're, what we're getting at.
I just don't want in the future, then we're having to spend more money than we have to move stuff to
Right.
get
No,
a
I
fence
don't-
in, or
I
it's a
won't
little.
pin it in like.
Sure, that was my only question and concern on that, so.
I'll make the motion, we approve the request to remove the perimeter fence along Bellevue Avenue from Main to Third at the cemetery.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we remove the fence at the cemetery on Bellevue Avenue. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Stepping down for the next one.
Okay. D.
Item 12D, the governing body is asked to consider support for the establishment of a combination child care facility and makerspace at the former Homestead Long-Term Care Facility on 3rd Street. At the June 17th joint meeting with Finney County and Holcomb, Finney County Economic Development representatives updated the entities on a proposal for a combination child care facility and makerspace in the former Homestead Long-Term Care Facility on 3rd Street. Both the child care and makerspace projects have been assisted by FCDC staff and have been presented in either their annual meetings or quarterly reports to the City Commission. The Homestead facility is vacant, and FCEDC has been negotiating a purchase price along with researching renovation costs and partnership opportunities for the development and operation of a combination facility. At the June 18th regular meeting of the City Commission, staff was directed to prepare an agenda item for the July 2nd regular meeting where the Commission could discuss the city's willingness to partner in the cost of acquiring and or renovating the facility for this purpose. The cost estimate for acquisition and renovation provided by FCDC is $600,000. The city does not have funds approved for this work in the 2019 budget or the proposed 2020 budget. If the city desires to be a funding partner in this initiative, the commission will need to indicate at what level they wish to be a partner and if they wish to amend either the 2019 budget or the 2020 budget accordingly. There are funds to which the city and county have both contributed, which are held by Finney County for the purpose of assisting with economic development projects. There is approximately $1.5 million in the fund currently. Finney County will make their 2019 contribution, which is about another $125,000 at year's end. A project on Farmland Road totaling about just short of $1 million that was local match to the transload facility project will be paid from this fund. While the discretion as to how to use the funds rests with the County Commission, the City Commission could express their support in the form of a vote to recommend or request the County Commission use, in whole or in part, the remaining funds to assist in either the form of a grant or a revolving loan. If the city and county were to assist in the acquisition and renovation of the facility, several details would need to be worked out in a more mature written agreement between the parties. While the Finney County Child Care and Early Learning Network is not yet formally incorporated, attached in your packet were the proposed bylaws for your information. The purpose of this agenda item is to determine and define the City Commission's willingness to partner at this time on the Child Care Makerspace project at the former Homestead Long-Term Care Facility. To that end, we see a spectrum of alternatives. The first are approving funding for a grant in whole or in part for the acquisition and renovation of the facility and amend the 2019 or 2020 budget accordingly. The second would be approving funding for a loan in whole or in part for the acquisition and renovation of the facility and amend the 2019 or 2020 budget accordingly. Item 3 is a blend of those of number 1 and 2. Number 4 would be a vote to formally indicate to the County Commission support for using the Joint Economic Development Funds for a grant in whole or in part for the acquisition and renovation of the facility. 5 is a vote to formally indicate to the County Commission support for using the Joint Economic Development Funds for a loan. And number 6 would be a blend of item 4 and 5. You could also take no action. Staff doesn't have a recommendation, but does encourage the Commission to provide some sort of indication to FCDC. So the fiscal note, $600,000 request includes both purchase and renovation. It's our understanding the purchase price is still under negotiation. That's not finalized, but FCDC believes that the combination of the negotiated purchase price, donated renovation work, and contracted renovation work can be done for this amount. The operational budget modeling for the child care facility prepared by FCDC and attached includes $4,500 a month for a lease, taxes, and insurance payment. And then the Makerspace operational budget includes a $2,200 a month budget line item for lease, taxes, and insurance payment. The amount specifically identified for the monthly rent or lease payment, which if in the Commission's considered a use of a loan tool, might be the number that you use for any math work you do in considering this, would be $3,000 per month for the child care facility and $1,500 for the Makerspace.
Okay. I might mention that we did tour the facility last night at 6:30, and it's fairly good shape. It does have a sprinkler system, which I was surprised to see. It's about 35,000 square feet total. And based on that, we're looking at about less than $10 a square foot to purchase this building, which you can't build much of a building for $10 a square foot, like zero. But we did look at it. We looked at the Makerspace, which is the curved part, if you're familiar with that building, and then the east part, which was added on later, would be for the daycare. And it's very little remodeling, I guess, for the front, and pretty major remodeling in the back, and that's why we're looking at the total budget of $600,000. Do we know what major employee like Tyson, the hospital, I mean, have they been approached? Would you like to comment on that? See kind of where we're at.
Yeah, Lana Duvall, Finney County Economic Development. Yes, we've been working very closely, not only with the public entities, but also with the corporate members of our community. If you looked at those bylaws, you see that that board of directors is comprised of those very people. So what we want to ensure is that the organization meets the needs of today's workforce, allows folks to get into the workforce who maybe aren't able to get into the workforce today due to a lack of qualified childcare, but beyond that also prepares a workforce for tomorrow. So certainly the idea is to provide high quality early learning in our community. And yes, our corporate members have been very much included in these discussions all along. I would note, I think there's still some confusion. There is nothing budgeted. If you look at the budgets for either of these organizations, neither of them budget any public funds as a part of their operations. So both of these entities have been designed to be fully self-sufficient. And really the reason that we brought this up to you, because number one, we do want our public entities and major employers, of which you are both of those, to be very involved in the Early Learning Network, but also because there's an opportunity right now, if we can come up with the capital to really take on a project that would work very well. We've looked at multiple buildings throughout the community, and to be honest with you, outside of nursing homes and some of the old single-level motels, there's really no buildings that easily retrofit into childcare. They just don't lend themselves to that. There are a lot of big buildings, but that doesn't mean that they'll work and that they'll work efficiently and economically for childcare use. So this really is a unique opportunity to pick up a facility. And I will be honest with you, from the economic development standpoint, we looked at that building for many different purposes. And when we were first approached, when we requested that someone come and build new senior living for us, we knew once Midwest Health made that decision that building would eventually become available. We've looked at it for housing lots, and the most we've been able to get are 8 to 9 awkwardly shaped housing lots. And by the time you purchase the building, tear down the building, extend the infrastructure you would need to each of those lots are going to be between $55,000 and $60,000 a piece. That's a pretty expensive lot in that neighborhood, so I don't think that's a real feasible option. The only other thing that really anybody had any consideration of was using it for low-income studio apartments, and again, the zoning really doesn't support that in that neighborhood either. So this really is a best use of location as well as creating a solution to some needs.
Yeah, so I want to ask some questions, because I've had a lot of feedback from citizens and people calling and emailing and also messaging, which is I'm the worst at, so using Messenger. So first of all, I'm totally for childcare, and I know that we need it. I mean, I think the biggest workforce development issue in our community is housing, and I think as a commission we've done a lot to move that forward. And I think now moving on to childcare makes perfect sense. So a couple of the concerns, and I think that's where the answers. So they're concerned about adults and then children and the safety between those two, and also that it's a 24-hour facility. And this is coming from childcare people who do childcare already or working in childcare facilities with adults so close proximity to adults, who could be working, however, at the Make It Take It Center. So.
Right. Couple of things. There is a distinct separation between the two facilities because there has to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have full firewall protection between the two buildings. The only connection is a hallway, which is already secured. So there won't be an opportunity for folks to go back and forth without supervision. That won't happen.
I've seen the drawing. I'm just saying they're indicating that they're concerned with adults on the premises that close to children. And so I want to make sure that that's elevated so that, you're aware of that this is part of that consideration.
Whether you put there's preschool in the Methodist Church, for instance, and there's adults certainly within that building at the very same time that those children are as well. And certainly a lot of industrial users in other communities build childcare facilities attached. And a lot of the folks working there don't have children.
Right. The other thing
still
is,
have access.
Yeah, and I know that they moved out of the building early because of the boiler system. And I know that a couple of contractors are saying, are they estimating, the estimates seem extremely low for the renovations. And they were saying, because I know they had to move out early because of the boiler system. Is that including that, replacing all of that? Or will that be phased in, or how are you guys?
Yeah, so just so you have a better understanding, since you weren't able to be at the tour last night. So the Lee family built that entire complex.
Yeah, my dad used to run the facility,
so they're
I grew
very
up there.
familiar with the building itself, very intimate with the construction of the building. They're who gave us the cost estimates based on the renovations that we requested, and they relied on the two subcontractors that they use in that building and have used for years for electrical and plumbing. So we feel very confident that they know what they're talking about when it comes to the plumbing, the HVAC, the electrical, and the construction integrity of that building. Yeah, thank you. Those are
No,
great
yeah,
questions.
these are these questions that people are asking and emailing.
Sure.
and-
But
and
there
I'm wanting
hasn't
to
been a
make sure that
formal
we're really
inspection
having
of the
a
building.
discussion.
Is that true? Like
In
by an
regards
inspector?
to what?
Well, like any kind of things that might come up that might need to be abated.
There
down the
has
line.
not been a contaminant survey. That's what that would be called, yeah. A contaminant survey, there has not been. That is one of our recommendations, is that we would ask to do that, so that if there's any issues of anything that would need to be remediated, that could be negotiated into that purchase price.
Yeah,
Yeah,
someone
which
had
is part of
mentioned-
why we haven't set a
Had
price.
mentioned asbestos, and I said, I don't know that that building has any, and I don't
Yeah.
know that you know either, so I said, I know.
Yeah,
know
we
that
have
that's-
explored that, and there's pretty sufficient confidence that none of the renovation work we're doing, if there were asbestos issues, that none of the renovation work we're proposing would have any impact on that. So, again, without a contaminant survey, we really can't say with certainty how that would be impacted. But we would recommend that that take place.
Yeah, the hard thing with the budget items, knowing that they've already allocated of that fund $950,000, I mean, that's the hard part with the
Well, I
county.
also want you to make sure, I'm still not sure you guys are following either. The payments that are in this budget, those will be going back
Mhm.
to that fund. So nobody's expecting it to
Right.
just be depleted. It is a loan.
Basically a loan
It-
without
it is.
interest.
And it can either be out of that fund, or it can be a bank loan secured by that fund. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options out there that you have to consider for that. But certainly, nobody's asking for a public handout. You know, the makerspace side actually does fit the goal that was set by the commissions when you developed the economic development plan for Finney County, because you did include an incubator in that plan originally, and that's never been done, which we're thankful that it was never done, because quite frankly, incubators never did really accomplish what folks hoped they would in communities. Makerspaces really are a better alternative. So if there was something that you did want to participate in from the public side, we would recommend that it be the makerspace and not childcare.
Would it close at the community college, or would it just be an extension at the community college?
The makerspace?
Right.
Right. The community college has been amazing to work with, and they've created some space for the makerspace, but it's nowhere near the space that they need to be fully active. So right now, they're able to offer almost half of the offerings that they have available to them. So by getting into the full-size space, they'll have, which the community college knew all along, that that was a temporary solution. They were just good enough to make it available. So,
And I put a call into Ryan this morning, and then just to ask, because I didn't get a chance, because I used to do a lot of things out at the college, and, and then they had an incredible woodworking shop, but I didn't get a chance to get a call back, and he might have called, I just didn't get a chance.
yeah, and they've made the woodworking shop available to the makerspace for right now.
Yeah, it's nice.
But it's part of some of the components of it for sure they want to keep on campus, but some of those components they may even be willing to put on long-term loan to the makerspace if they're off-site.
Someone suggested too, and I mean, you probably considered this, but the 8th Street facility that closed, I know that they had some issues, and I know that you did some work to try to help keep them open and everything like that. Is there an alternative to help that location reopen, knowing that this is a couple of years or maybe 6 to 8 months down the road? Is there a way to help that space open with dollars, or?
In our look at the 8th Street facility, because the rooms weren't designed to maximize the capacity, thereby allowing maximization of the ratios, coupled with the cost to acquire the building and certainly the cost to renovate the building, the numbers would not make sense. It couldn't cash flow. It would lose money every single year, unfortunately.
So are you, you're asking for our recommendation, support, what?
Yeah.
Well, I guess, hold on. I think,
Okay.
are we putting the cart before the horse on this thing? Because it's not even formally incorporated yet. I mean, we read the proposed bylaws, but are we really kind of putting the cart before the horse on this whole thing?
No, the child
Because
care center would
it-
be a tenant of whoever owns the building. They won't own the building, so they don't have to be formed.
But the whole thing's not even incorporated yet. What I'm saying is, are we making a decision before you guys are even before this whole thing's even a corporation, before it's even an organization in itself?
Well, without your support, there's no reason to
no
go forward and
organization.
incorporate it. So really, I guess it's a chicken and egg, if you will, Commissioner Cessna, because really, we're at that point where if the public entities want, the corporate side has assured us they're in because they recognize the need for this, but we don't have that from you, and I really think that's why Matt chose to push this forward and ask, you know, if we were ready to have this discussion. Because if that's your will, we didn't want to form an organization that we said you're going to serve on the board of directors for, only to have you say, we don't think we need childcare.
Well,
That
and I
creates
don't think
challenges.
anyone's saying we don't need childcare, and I think that's the problem that you run into. But is it the governing entity's responsibility for that? And that's what they keep saying. So, I mean, what part of our money and how we spend those tax dollars, that's what they're saying. And I mean, the loan thing, I mean, that's, you know, you brought clarity on that. But again, they're asking, these are tax dollars, so, you know, I mean, so how does that work and what's our responsibility?
I think
Workforce development isn't.
We're not using tax dollars.
That
we
$1.5
would.
million is tax,
Well,
those are
but
dollars that we
that's-
saved away.
Well, but that, we've already budgeted that.
But that's still dollars that were tax dollars that were collected and put in
Yeah.
that fund.
Budgeted for economic development
Yeah.
purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to decide, is childcare an
Right,
economic development
exactly.
issue?
And that's what they're asking.
Yeah, and I would say we've made that case pretty clear.
So my policy position, which I've made clear multiple times, but let me just say this, and I think that as we go forward into our later discussion today about the budget, is our central question is, what is our responsibility as a city government to fund? And maybe I'm being hyperbolic, but if there was a natural disaster, that would be a no-brainer. We would be right there. For a lot of families, not having childcare is a natural disaster. And there are a lot of models across the country for municipalities that do subsidize childcare, whether it be participating in some sort of program where they subsidize grant spots or those kind of things, or a building. And so I would very much support alternative 6 in this alternative list. I do think it's a role of government to support this, and I do think it's an economic development issue. And I think it's a service that we provide to our community as much as, and as valuable as some of the other services.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, I know that there was an alternative for 48,000 is a lot less than 600,000. I mean, that was asked for or requested. I mean, these could be used the same way from these funds. So, I mean, if you're talking about daycare slots, and if it's just simply daycare slots, who gets that dollars and who doesn't get that dollars? Yeah, I think that's important. So, I mean, you know, so if we're saying if it's all about daycare slots, and we have someone that's ready to go, then the
That's a good point.
the $48,000, I mean, is a far cry from $600,000, $200,000 to acquire the building, and then the renovation costs. So I'm just saying, so if that's the dollars, and we're looking at, like you said, budgeting coming up,
Do we make it a priority of this, of our community, this commission, and this government's role to say, yes, we recognize this as a need, and you've got a viable option that meets the standards that we're going to do, and we do think that that's worth putting some money towards, whether that be in a form of a grant or a loan. I think that's valid, and we do have that somewhat informal but request made today during the public hearing, and I think your point is valid, yes.
And I might jump in here, the options, kind of breadth of options between loan and grant, and then what's that?
I said there was a bunch of options, yeah, I think there's.
Was to give a commission of sort of what do we believe is in play to help you give a message or some sort of indication as to whether or not you want an agency who receives your funds to work on your behalf in the area of economic development to continue working on it. The loan option is one that's designed for, potentially for a way to repeat it, right? I mean, so it could be one that the FCCELN, right? Is that right?
The
You did
longest
it.
name ever.
Might have to work on that.
That might be the-
one.
Might have to get that on a building if you ever get it on a
That's
building.
that's just the
not
first
gonna
time I've
fit.
got it right. The FCCELN, I think anticipates if, you know, at full growth or to have more than one facility. And so the loan is something that could be repeated with that group, and you'd have to create some rules around it, like who's eligible, who's not eligible, but could be used by others as well. And there's a payback methodology, and so you could use it as sort of impact investing sort of in principle or in practice, much like when it was important to do facade restoration downtown, there was that sort of revolving loan network. There's been over the years CDBG revolving loans. So I think there's a way to structure that so if somebody else comes up and says, hey, I'd like a piece of that action too, you've at least got some criteria by which you could say, yeah, we do that for you too. And it might very well be something that in the one that was brought up in the request to speak, the public comment, might be an advantage to that. I think if you sort of right size it to kind of a number of, or a dollar amount per state authorized childcare spot, you've sort of got your math worked out. And because that's what you're after, right? I mean, the commission, if you, or those that are interested in this subject or believe it's part of a genuine community need, there's sort of a value per spot out there. And I guess this would be a way to define what's your contribution per spot.
So I'm
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm struggling with this idea that, because, I mean, I know that you've done your due diligence looking at locations, and so, but, I mean, all of the input that I've received is this is not the location. And so, and that's what's really hard, is that they don't have all the due diligence with the location. I mean, I think some of the points they make were valid, and I mean, I think you've answered, this idea, but is this the location? And that's what's really hard to help. I mean, all this information came out, and as far as not attending that last night, I had no idea that you guys were touring the facility. So I didn't have an invitation. So I didn't know. But as far as that facility, I've grown up in that facility. That's where my dad used to manage that for 20 years. I had grandmas and grandpas in that facility. I know every nook and cranny and hiding place. So the thing about the thing is with the public, they're asking, so here, this is a new, this is something new, and so they're now getting used to it, and I think more information is coming out, and it creates a greater sense of security for me to do to say, yeah, is this something that we can do? Is this something that we want to do? And so I'm just being upfront with you what I'm struggling with and telling you that, when I'm answering to voters and the people are saying, hey, these are the questions, and this is the first time I've really had a chance to really ask the question.
Yeah,
and publicly, it's important.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think every other commissioner has either been to a public discussion about childcare or has come into the office and met with us to ask about childcare. I think really you are the only one who hasn't had that opportunity. So we certainly don't mind answering the questions. You would find if you looked through our research, it is all very well-founded research, and every bit of it can be backed up.
I do like Commissioner Burns, that 6 is grant and loan. I like that combination instead of just grant. And because that way you are paying back part of that. And
Yeah, and I'll just for clarification, so the reason those budgets are set up the way they are, we knew all along that the Makerspace probably would never own its own property, so it was always designed to pay a lease. But with the child care centers, one of the ongoing solutions is that either employers could invest in an employer-owned facility, and we would be able to have the network basically go in and operate within it, paying the operational costs through that lease, or in housing developments, as we look to building new large housing developments where we know there's going to be a propensity for a lot of young children. Again, we'd have that opportunity to work with the developer and say, hey, we know this is going to create additional need. Do you mind building us this building? We have the blueprints. Build it on this property, and it'll pay a lease back to you. You get paid off eventually, or you can retain ownership of it and just take the lease forever. So it's been designed that way all along. This was never designed to be a publicly funded answer for childcare. And we've tried to say that as many ways as we possibly could. We looked first for a private solution. Those private solutions cost between $240 and $300 per week. That's the going rate for the franchises and the nationals who will come into our community to provide it. Our citizenry simply can't afford that. So we had to find another solution. It would have been much easier to handle this the same way we did senior living, call for a study, call for folks to come in and decide to come build in our community. That would have been awesome, but that wasn't gonna work for our community members, and we weren't going to promote that idea. So I hope that helps you to understand the dire nature of what took us 4 years later to the point where we can assure you this is the best solution for childcare available.
I think there was, I heard some complaints about maybe traffic and that type of thing. And,
That wasn't.
and land values going down because of this kind of a facility. But I think, really, I mean, the people are just coming in, dropping their kids off, leaving, so it's not, you're not gonna be there, pick them up at 5 o'clock or whenever. So, what is the budget? I mean, are you proposing the $160 per person for childcare or what?
That, in that budget, that's what's included in it, yes.
And the thing about like the city, any of these big employers, they can do payroll deduction, write one check every month, and that helps your collection. Because I've been involved with the community church daycare.
Yeah.
And when the hospital was there, it was great. They paid every month. When the next person took over, it was pretty difficult.
It's a little tougher, yeah. To be honest, you know, the only way that these childcare networks, the reason they work is because we've been very diligent in balancing the children who are in attendance there to ensure that we maximize the food program, because it's a very big part of making the bottom line work, but also ensuring that we follow all of KCSL, the federal requirements for Head Start and early Head Start programming, which allows us then to partner locally with KCSL and provide additional learning opportunities for those young people as well, so.
And I think that's a big part of what we ought to consider as we go forward, talking about grants and being in the position to look at different providers, including the gentleman who came today. I am all for childcare, and the more the better, with the stipulation it has to be safe, it has to be well regulated, it has to be someplace that inspires confidence for the parents, so that they're getting a value for that money that they pay for it. And I think that a network can help provide that accountability. And so if we could build a network through interested parties, and we serve as a maybe an initial capital investment, as Mr. Allen was saying, again, the more the better, but it has to be high quality.
And that network is designed to serve all other childcare providers regardless, whether they're home providers, other center providers. It's designed to provide resources, training, that type of stuff, ongoing.
I had mentioned earlier, go ahead.
Go ahead. You said you talked to corporate about, I mean, not public, but the private industry or industry about this. And what was their input on this, I guess? Because you're kind of how you noted, it's kind of our decision to make this thing go forward or not. And it's like, well, I can't
As
see-
it's designed, yes, that's correct.
As it's designed?
Right, because it's designed really to have that public and private balance, if you will, to ensure, again, transparency and make sure that we don't have concerns with, we don't want to build a bunch of facilities that can't support themselves. So we want to make sure there's proper oversight and proper involvement in that.
I guess one
But
way, go ahead.
I guess, is there corporate funding in, I mean, why is this becoming the city commission's decision-making process for daycare in the community? I understand that we need daycare in the community, but how
And
is
Matt
it-
may wanna
how is it
answer
our-
that.
How is it coming back to us where we're using taxpayer dollars to make this decision on the city commission? I'm not getting the corporate where, I understand you talked about industry, but Are they in this mix
Yes.
somewhere, and I'm not getting that, I
Yes,
guess?
they are. I can't obviously
Right, I
tell you
understand.
right now what those are going to look like. But we've actually been contracted to do some in-depth studies on a couple of the very large employers. We're about a fourth of the way through that process right now. So once we've reached the end of that, yes, they'll absolutely be intending to contribute based on the need that they show in their own companies. But again, we're not asking you to pledge public dollars, to give public dollars to this. We've not asked you to spend public dollars. We've not even asked you to grant. We didn't ask for that. What has always been assumed from both the makerspace and the childcare site was that for capital investment, someone else would have to make that capital investment. Now, if you would rather we go to a private investor and have them purchase that and let the network lease it back, that's absolutely doable, but that's what we need to know from you. If you don't want to be that investor, if you will, that gets paid back the money from the entities, then you just need to tell us that, and we can go to the private side for that. But again,
So, yeah,
this
so
is
they haven't-
a
so-
timing concern. This building's available now, and it meets obviously the demands of two separate organizations that we've been working diligently on to solve.
Okay,
Does that help?
that answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Matt, you were going to say
Comment?
something, or?
Anybody in the audience?
Doesn't have
I
it.
think it's kind of gotten flushed out
The
through
minutia.
through the discussion, yeah.
Well, I'd entertain a motion, I guess.
I'd make a motion that we approve alternative number 6.
Do you want to read? Which is?
Sure. I would make a motion that we approve to vote to formally indicate to the county commission our support for using the joint economic development funds for a combination grant and loan in whole or in part for the acquisition and renovation of this facility.
Third Street, basically. Okay.
Yes,
Is there
sir.
a second? I'll second that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we vote for number 6, vote on number 6 for a joint support and for funds in a combination of a grant or a loan in whole or in part for the acquisition of the renovation of the facility formerly known as
Homestead or Briar Hill Manor?
Home,
Yeah, Briar Hill Manor.
home what?
Homestead. that's what it's-
Homestead, yeah, Homestead. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
2 and 2. So it's a neutral position. Right?
You're chairing the meeting.
I don't know.
I'll make a motion that we formally indicate to the county commission support for use of the joint economic development funds for a loan in whole or in part for the acquisition and renovation of the facility.
I'll second.
Which number is that?
5.
That's number 5.
Let's go down the
We gotta
line.
go by
5, sure.
Way backwards.
Did we start at 1?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, is there a and we've seconded it? Any
Yes.
further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1 nay. Motion passed. Okay,
Thank you.
I think that'll take care of that part.
Item, let's see, where were we? E?
E.
E.
Governing body is asked to consider, approve, and authorize the publishing of the 2020 budget notice of public hearing. And I think we're, over the course of the last few meetings, we've presented the 2020 budget to you. There was a lengthy memo, at least from a cover memo standpoint, so I won't read that to you during the meeting. But it sort of lays out where we are now, the choices that are before the commission, based on the comments at the last meeting, we sort of sketched out some draft notices of public hearing, just to show you what they'd look like, probably realizing that none of those specifically may get used. And if the commission arrives at a point where they're comfortable with a notice of public hearing today, we would prepare one and to reflect what you want it to reflect if one of those three isn't the one. The commission does have until August 25th to have submitted to the state of Kansas our adopted annual budget. It does take some time to put together from a staff, because we take it from the form that we use into a state form that is what's required to use when we submit the budget. So that can take 2 or 3 days to put together once the budget's adopted. But conceivably, you have the next meeting at which you could issue a notice of public hearing. There's 10 days required between the publication of the notice and when you hold the hearing. Randy's advice in the past is that you should use 11 days to count, including the day that you make the vote, not counting the day you have the hearing. That makes it 10 days in between, sort of thing. So, you also have that third week town hall meeting in there that you could make use of that in some way if you want to. So the memo has tried to give you a lay of the land, where we stood following the last meeting or after the presentation of the city manager's proposed budget. At this point in time, I think the way to go about it is just for the commission to begin discussing or asking us any questions that you have for clarification, and then maybe discussing some things that haven't yet been brought up that you might like to see if the other commissioners are supportive of or not supportive of. Staff will be taking notes and try to be able to react if you ask us as to how we think that might impact the budget.
So this basically is, this proposal, table 1, is 2.55 mils. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just to be clear, the table is where we ended up at the conclusion of the city manager's proposed budget. You couldn't adopt that budget without the statutorily required vote on the tax lid. It's a little bit over, and we indicate what that number is. But yeah, 2.6 and change up.
I thought the initial budget as presented as we were going through it was responsible. There wasn't anything that I took significant issue with, thinking it was unnecessary. And then I appreciated that staff went back and made some further reductions. The 1.46, bringing it down by that much more, that was included in this memo for today. And so as I looked through, I thought that I would hope that we could take a look at that second draft, which would be an approximate 1.1 mil increase over 2019.
Those changes that Commissioner Burns indicated that we've found since would like to indicate to the police department and the parks department, those are, as a commissioner, you're probably asking yourself, well, what are we sacrificing then? And what are, we overreacting to trying to arrive at a number? We believe that all of these are changes that we would recommend you make. Andy Liebelt indicated that the irrigation, the $50,000 for an irrigation project, that $50,000 won't get spent next year because his irrigation working is going to be focused on the project at Valley View Cemetery. Now, the commission could set that $50,000 aside, transferred in the 05 fund for the purpose of an irrigation project in a future year. But that is not, those monies won't get expended in 2020. The parks budget was, my understanding was a wrong number, or we had gotten something for an amount, and our projected amount was in the 2019 year. Is that right, Melinda?
That's right,
that's a
lease payment.
Yeah, so there's no, that 10,000 is a reduction that we would fully support. And then the police department budget, there was various line items, and the detail was attached. There's nothing that goes away by virtue of changing those 2019 and 2020 numbers. So all of those we would support.
So I just want to make sure, so that the police study indicated a new, community services section, is that still going to be able to be funded? And I mean, I think from when I read your memo that, because I saw the lieutenant position was still there, I just want to make sure, because that seems pretty important to the success of the police department and moving forward.
Thanks for asking the question. Yes, the lieutenant position is in the budget. We added that at the budget 2 weeks ago, knowing that it was in that report. And so the lieutenant position, the $80,000, I believe is the number we used, is in this budget.
So if we go ahead and just accept those 2019 in the police side, but then say, well, on the 2020, it's new equipment and maintenance and stuff like that, do you know what that would do to a budget? The mill levy in that case, if we just kept on that for the 2020, 86?
Yes, I can. So $86,000 is roughly more than a fourth, less than a third of a mil.
Right.
Do you have your calculator on you?
I don't have a calculator.
Okay.
Your brain, I thought your brain was your calculator, so.
Less than a third of a mil.
211, yeah.
So it'd be about
More, a little bit more.
240,000.
Everybody can watch me do math.
211,000.
211. So if you divide.
About 41%.
40.7. 0.4 of a mil.
Yep.
Ish.
There was, what about the carryover money? I was reading that somewhere in here, I can't put my finger on it.
I think it's
1.2 million or something, or what is it?
The budgeted cash carryover would, in the previous, in the fiscal note, there's a reference to it of the memo that I wrote, not the Novus agenda preparation. So page 4 of the attachment probably. The 2020 budget is a $3.2 million cash carryover, or should that be 3.3?
3.2.
And last year's was 3.1.
Right.
All right, so consistent with the financial management policy, and I'll let Melinda kind of talk about that. This budget proposes an increase into the budgeted cash carryover, if that's what you were talking about. So she can talk to how that ties to your financial management policies.
Every year, we look at our fund balance at the end of the year, and we do some tests on it, and in January or February, once we have our ending cash balance, you do approve a resolution that states that we are meeting our fund balance policies. And increasing it always helps us with our Moody's review when we do our debt analysis. So increasing your fund balance is always a good practice in years where you can.
I guess my question was why can't you just adjust that fund balance and take care of some of this?
You could, that is an option.
But then.
To withdraw
there's-
from it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying, just from withdrawal year.
In other words.
But
But less
that
than that
was-
threshold, then it could affect our rating by Moody's.
Right.
What is that threshold? Do you know, or?
3 months of expenses.
And that 3.2 million
So that's
represents that?
That meets
I
it.
see.
I don't know if this is the place to bring it up, but we do have 500,000 budgeted for pool without capital outlay. And so maybe while we are not poised to make a decision on the pool, maybe just an idea about open, closed putting that money, which I think because in our back of our head is if we close it, we were gonna put it towards whatever new project, but that is a $500,000 item that's been budgeted.
For balancing, you mean, for next year?
Yeah, it's included in this year's budget. I'm sorry.
You're talking about the operation
Operational,
deficit
right.
for
For 2020,
the existing
yeah.
pool.
I'm not sure we're ready to make that decision,
But that's
What's-
$500,000.
No, it is, it's a,
What's the mill levy that can go the highest before it goes to a public vote?
That's at the beginning of the memo.
But the memo takes into account cutting the police in 2020, which that's one of those accepted things that can go up without the public vote.
No, right here. It says that a maximum amount the city can levy without an election would be $8,402,296.
And if and that is a little bit, you're both right. One of the exempted items is increases in, I don't know if it uses the word law enforcement or public safety, but if let's say you were at the lid point, but had made the reductions in the 2019-2020 budgets as shown in number 3. You could add back in actually all of number 3 if you wanted to, and you would, well, no, only the increase, only 2020. You would be able to add to whatever your lid was, that 86,000, because it's an exempted expense. That calculation that you saw, that the state provides us that we have to run through in the state form, that's 3 pages long, is what is now the administrative burden of every local government unit when it works through the state tax lid legislation.
So table 1, which you presented to us, we have to, just for clarification, it's over the lid, so we'd have to cut to avoid the tax ballot issue by 63,000 in the memo.
Correct.
So
but
just,
that's 2.55 mil.
right. So draft 2, I'm just gonna go down through each one here. So draft 2, it asks for an increase of 1.1 mils. And the reason how we got to that point is we reduced the budget shown in table 1, but we're increasing the mill rate by 1.1 mils, right?
It makes the changes identified not in the table, but listed in items 1 through 3
Right.
on the
Yeah,
screen
that's
right now.
Right.
I like
Okay.
that.
And then item, the
Then
third
the
one.
third draft is just a 0.5 mil increase. But we have to do some balancing issues
In our revenues.
in our revenue side. And then draft 4 is increase, reductions of the memo, plus 125,250 increase in the sales tax receipts. But that's, again, kind of a balancing
but that's
issue.
one where you reduce that, that's where you
And then-
reduce the cash carryover.
Right, and then we reduce the cash carryover on the budget.
But what's in the mill levy would be balanced.
Right, the mill levy wouldn't increase on draft 4.
Do we know what the other agencies are proposing or at this point? Probably don't, do I?
They haven't publicly discussed that, and I've had discussions with the CAOs. I think there's going to be upward pressure for both the college and the county. The school district, I don't know. But I would say, my gut is that they're about in the same area as we're looking at the county level and the college level.
Well, on draft 2, I mean, I know we increase the mill levy by 1.1 mils, but we do have some projects that are kind of, that we're doing research on currently. I mean, the big pool is one of the projects that we're looking at, as well as the, the airport, as well as trying to build a reserve for that to move the airport terminal forward. So, I mean,
it's interesting when you
it's just-
mention the big pool, because, I mean, it is something that, I mean, it's going, I don't know where we're gonna land on the decision, but I mean, this might be a year to save dollars, I mean, but I'm.
or we,
That's-
I mean, or we could, there is money there if that's the direction we want to go on.
Not
I mean,
sure
there's-
we're ready to make
Yep.
that decision.
The other thing we
Right.
need to be thinking about is we have a tax lid. That
Right.
doesn't allow us to freely choose what our appropriate rate should be.
Here's another way to look at it, which previous commissions have done before, is you can't, once you set the mill levy, you can't go up, but you can always come,
Right.
but you can always come back and go down.
Right. And if we need an increase of, say, 6 mills next year, it's very hard to do that, whereas if you do it in increments, it is. And especially if we're talking about possible large projects that have to do with FEMA, for example.
Yeah,
Where-
that's that back of the mind thing that and I mean, that could impact not only homeowners with property tax, but then you get double
Valuation.
your insurance, your
Right.
valuation,
Right.
and I mean, it's,
So
I mean, it's kind of the
time
elephant
to
in
be
the
able
room,
to
but-
start, time to be able to start impacting that and being able to set aside is when we still have house valuations. If there's some new map that comes out that adversely impacts valuations, the proper time is ahead of time to start that.
So which proposal do you think?
I would say 1. Okay, so the thing is, with that police on 2020, that allows us to go,
I've got that answer for you.
Okay.
We went through that worksheet, and you could, the total dollars that you could raise, if you kept the 86,000 in the police department's budget for the calculation, you could raise 8,489,586, which is 40.141 mils.
okay,
and we're at 37.
40 point, I don't have a good calculator.
That would be at 2.67 mils.
So that's like the absolute cap.
That's the
basically.
absolute
That's the
top.
absolute cap that we can
Right.
do.
I think it's
So that would be, on a $100,000 property, that would be an extra $3 a month,
yeah, but
about $3 a month.
it's commercial property that really gets zapped.
Well, and I want to say, I appreciate the graphics you sent out. That was really nice to explain to people, this is what this could look like. So they were excellent, really well done.
Well, any other comments, commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, that to me is a big increase, not knowing also some of the unknowns. I think it's interesting that, we talk about the big pool, but maybe this is the year you say, do we give it a rest? And then, I mean, that could, like you said, balance the budget. I'm not saying we're ready to make the decision, but the 2.3 is, that's,
Maybe we're not ready, but maybe we need to. I mean, not what we're doing going forward, but
Yep.
yay, nay on are we opening
no.
next summer, for sure, and where that $500,000 goes.
That's another day
That's,
worth of discussion.
I think it's an appropriate discussion, and you all can decide if it's appropriate for now. What I want to chime in on is I would not encourage you to save a year's worth of operating expenses to offset recurring
Right.
Yeah, you're
budget
kicking the can down the
expenses,
road,
because
yeah,
then you'll
just
have to
kicking the
make
can
up
down.
that 500 next year. Now, if that could go do a one-time expense, like a capital project or something of that nature, then, yeah, you'll have to weigh which you want to do, or if you want to war chest it for an answer towards the big pool. Yeah, those are all good. I would,
I think that's always been our assumption, is what we would do with that. Even if we close next year, we'd budgeted 500,000. I mean, I think
We
that
would
was
have
kind of the
saved it,
assumption
right.
going
Right.
through. We would then use that as a big pool investment, big pool
Correct.
replacement investment. But that was kind of an assumption I made, maybe that wasn't across the commission.
No. And my hope was that we could keep everything flat. I mean, we've been doing that for the last several years. I mean, I was hoping that. I mean, you know, I mean, the 0.5 I was really comfortable with, and that's still where I'm kind of landing. Knowing that we are, I thought it was interesting. I didn't know that we were the first ones out the gate. And then, you know, with some of the things that are coming up, I'm just wanting to make sure that we, affordable housing, and you can, and the property owners, even if you rent, it's got to be passed on. It's just how it is. They do. And so I just, and like the mayor said, I mean, commercial property owners, man, they get, you know, your residential do too, but your commercial also. So, I mean, so I'm very comfortable at the 0.5. I mean, I could be the 1 mil or 1.1 mil. I mean, I would consider, but
I'm more thinking on the 2 side. I would much rather make a move once. To me, it's better to do 2% or 2 mil once than 1% and 1%. Because if you do 2%, you have that 2 twice. Do 1 and 1 again, you have a little piece that you're missing. And it's, if we have a shortfall, I think it's easier to solve it once than try to just kind of piece it along. I mean, the city hasn't raised its mill overall in at least 10 years, and it's in fact been going down slightly. I mean, so I don't think it's for lack of us doing a good job as a city, but
Well,
at some point,
Valuation goes up.
right. And in this case, we have less money available per mill, and that's actually because of growth that we are in this, but I don't want to say, well, the county's gonna maybe raise their mill and everybody else is going to, so we shouldn't, because we shouldn't for a long time, while the counties over the last 3 or 4 years have raised it a lot.
The issue I have with the 3rd and 4th options are, I don't think that we should adjust our projection on our sales tax up,
Right.
and then we miss that. I think
Right.
that's a very difficult assumption to make, or a risky assumption to make, and I prefer not to do that.
I mean, I think with the sales tax, I know that soon, I don't know how many years, but one of the big TIF projects are coming off and that, you might be able to project that, but that's not this year.
Right.
And so thinking about, I mean, this is year by year, and so,
Well,
again, I've indicated, I mean, I'm comfortable, very comfortable with the 0.5, the 1.1 is, you know, I mean, if that's somewhere that we can, as a commission can land, I'm willing to do that. I can't, the 2.3 I can't do.
I think that's, I mean, it's just you know, all the other agencies are looking at 1. I mean, it's gonna be a pretty good increase
Well,
overall, but
how many times have they cared about what our rate is? I mean, do they just raise theirs because we aren't raising ours? So I mean, that's not a pass that we can.
But I don't think we can raise it that much too. I'm more comfortable with 1.1 myself.
I think that budget accomplishes what we need to accomplish too. I mean, I think it's, as I said in my opening statement, I think this was a responsibly presented budget. I appreciate the recommendations that were made by staff. We still have a responsibility to accomplish what we need to do. And sometimes, yes, that does entail raising the mill.
What do you
It's worth it.
I'll make the motion that we approve the notice of public hearing for the 2020 budget to be held at 1:30 at the July 16th regular meeting. Consideration of the draft second notice of the public hearing with the draft 2, or the second draft,
Is there a second?
with the
to that?
1.1 mil
I
increase.
second.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion of draft 2, which is 1.1 mil increase maximum, could be less? Right?
Well, we set it at that. That's
Yeah,
what we set it
can't
at,
be
but
less.
we can't go any higher, but we
Right.
can go lower. I mean, we can always say, well, we'll come back and we don't want this project to happen, or we don't want this to happen, and we can reduce it. It just can't go any higher, correct?
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank everybody
Linda.
for their hard work on
My
putting this
goodness.
budget together.
Yes. Second that.
Is that the only thing we're discussing?
We got a
So there's an executive session. The staff does not anticipate any action being required following the executive session. So if the commission would like to take up the consent agenda and then the commission reports, then we can shut down Channel 8 and do the
Okay.
executive session.
Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda G1 through 3. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioner Burns, commission report.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Yep.
Have fun, be safe. That's all I have.
Commissioner Sessa.
He looks so relieved.
Short and sweet. I like it.
Again, 4th of July, just remember the dates to discharge fireworks are 10 o'clock, or 10:30 in the morning till 10:30 in the evening. Just want to mention that it is prohibited to discharge fireworks or possess fireworks on any USD 457 property, so just be mindful of that. It was a great honor to approve the renaming of the Central Fire Station to be named the Alan Shelton Central Fire Station, honoring his 44 years of dedicated service to this community. I wish him well in his deserved retirement that he so well deserves. I want to congratulate our communications staff and crew on the video of Chief Shelton's final ride and last radio call for this retirement. In the little byline, it says, "You need a tissue," and I pretty much agree. It was,
did, yeah.
it was job well done on that. I did notice in the paper that the Kansas Supreme Court upheld the Topeka's ban on tobacco sales to customers that are under 21 years of age. They had a couple of businesses that were trying to reverse that, and the Supreme Court said no, that the city had its constitutional rights of home rule and the power to make that decision. So I know we, a couple of months back, made that ruling of having tobacco sales of nobody could purchase under the age of 21 cannot purchase tobacco. So that was kind of a good thing in our favor too, because I could kind of see that having some court rulings on here if that went the other direction. I noticed that the Police Explorer program, I got a lot of stuff today, sorry, I just noticed. The Police Explorer program is taking applications. I don't know if Chief wants to come up right quick and say anything about it, but it's a great program. Have a lot of awards from the program, and students really do a lot of great things with this program. If you want to
Yes, we are taking applications. The Explorers just went to an event in Topeka with 15 other agencies showing up, so we'll find out what the results are and report back to you. One of our Explorers, Brecken Ralston, just got back from the National Academy, and we'll get him on the agenda to recognize him coming up. But yeah, it's a great program. It helps develop the youth and push them towards some leadership roles, whether they stay in law enforcement or not. One of our Explorers just left and went into the Marine Corps, so great opportunity for our youth.
And that's for eighth graders that are 14 to 21, or
Yes.
should be eighth graders that completed the eighth grade, but for people that are age 14 to 21, if I get that right. Right. Okay. And then just I know we talked about the opioid summit that's on July 24th. That's something that I know Chief has got, sorry, I just mentioned that again, but I know he's been working with the coalition on putting that together. I know that's an issue here locally, but state and national, it's an issue. I did notice too that the County did approve to renew or put on the ballot for November the Bridge Road Maintenance Program, and we do get some funding from that, and it's every 6 years they have to renew that. So I noticed that they did put that on the budget for coming up in November, so.
Quarter cent.
Yeah, it's quarter cent or 0.25% for that, so. A lot of things. That's all I've got.
Okay. Commissioner Dick.
I'd also like to thank again Chief Shelton for his years of service. If you think about how long 44 years is, we can't say thank you 44 years and reach what he has done for the community. I mean, there's probably ample nights that he woke up and did something or sacrificed his family for that service. So I don't think we can ever be grateful enough for what he has done for our city. I also like to just mention how good the pre-meeting was. I'm appreciative of everybody who came out and from the local companies that came out and talked with us about the itinerant merchant license and stuff like that. I thought it was a very good pre-meeting. And then I also like to thank everybody in the city for their work, and especially Melinda on the budget. I mean, that's a massive, massive project, and it's one of those things when we're deciding where to set that mill levy. You can tell when it's a good budget when you look through and you're like, there's not much to really trim. It's been pre-trimmed to be as efficient as possible, and I'd like to thank the police department and parks for finding some of those places where we can get that mill down to something that's agreeable for us to take on. So I'd like to thank all the city staff and Matt and everybody who led that this year. So thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Hunter.
Yeah, when you go last, you don't get it. All the good stuff said now. You know, if you have not been to the big pool this year, it's looking incredible again, and the water is sufficiently cold when you first get in. Then after that, it goes away. Also, I was down and I took a walk through our incredible zoo, and you know, sometimes during the day, if you need a break or a brain break, or it is, I'll tell you, it is worth it. So we have a wonderful zoo. The staff is constantly busy, very, very courteous when you're walking through, and I see people from all cars and people from all over, and so it's really, again, if you need a break, take a break down there. It's really great. Alan Shelton and the fire chief, I'll tell you, that is going from volunteer to full. I mean, he has taken us the whole way up, and so I really appreciate that. There isn't any replacing him, but what it is someone stepping in that you stand on the shoulders of those who came before, and I think he is one of those giants that are helping us. Great turnout at the pre-meeting, so much interaction and so much great information. I love every pre-meeting to be like that. That's really what we are looking for, that citizen input. I would say also, I don't want to be the anti-firework person at all, but I get a lot of calls. I mean, again, 10:30 is 10:30. So please, for these pets. No, it isn't 11 or 10:30, and yeah. So please, if you would, our police department and our fire department they're busy with really other things. So please don't make your neighbors call you, to go out at 10 whatever it is, and so let people get some sleep and rest, and some animals just relax for a little bit. And so just to let you know, and people are continually saying, hey, can we shorten this? Can we shorten this? And every year it's probably the discussion I'm going to have. But I also want to thank you for the budget work, and then Melinda and every single city department. I know they worked hard to really bring something responsible, and so that's appreciated. And we as a commission really appreciate the work that you do. So thank you.
Right quick. You did mention the pool. I noticed on our Facebook posting, they did get a 24-hour viewing of how the water, the pool's clear full, and then the next day it's not clear full.
Can you get the mayor on that one thing and we video that? I was hoping that for this year. So.
Pass.
But if you haven't seen that, that's a good illustration of when we talk about the 200,000 gallons leaking out of the pool, that really illustrates it. So if you want to see that, it really drives home the point. That's all I got. Thanks, Mayor.
Good pre-meeting. I thought had one of the best turnouts I think we've ever had for a pre-meeting. So obviously there's a lot of people that are interested in that, and especially if we have another hailstorm. there'll be a lot of roofers coming in. And also, on the fireworks, one thing we need to mention is clean up those fireworks out of the street at the end of the day. At least push them over. Yeah, water them down and then push them over to at least to the gutter. And then the next day, you can pick them up and put them in the dumpster. But don't put them in the dumpster, even if you water them down, because sometimes they will start a fire, and we've had a few of those. Can't add much to Chief Shelton's award. I think he knows that he has a lot of friends, and like at that meeting at 10:30, there was a lot of people there that I didn't know that were friends, and so he's touched a lot of people. The other thing, we got this report on the pool attendance, and it looks like our pool attendance is about 330 average per day. And, you know, you look at Salina, Dodge City, Hutch, Hayes, and most of those are a lot more. I know about some of them are 600. Yeah. Here's one average, 858, 762. So they're getting about twice as many people in their pool as we are for some reason.
Oh, I think the reason is the
different.
water. I was out there swimming, it's the water.
It's
Let me not, I do, I think that the
It's
reason is
cold.
the water, honestly.
Yeah.
More, I mean, and the features are nice and all of these things, but the water is too cold for ladies my age.
Yeah. So anyway,
you know
that
you're
was
alive.
all,
Makes you know you're alive.
But now you feel alive.
yeah.
You do.
I guess that will, you want to read that?
On
We
that
need to
note,
do
I make a
anything.
motion that we consider
Yeah.
an executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1 pertaining to personal matters of non-elected personnel and their contractual obligations, because if this matter were discussed in open session, it might invade the privacy of those discussed. And this discussion item is on part for,
Yes,
Real estate?
specifically to talk to the city manager about his responsibilities in a personnel matter.
a personnel matter with
How long?
Jake Cunningham,
Jay
Matt
Cunningham,
Allen.
Jennifer Cunningham.
For Cunningham.
Matt Allen.
And for, how long do we need?
15 minutes.
Okay, we'll start at 3 o'clock. We'll take a little break.
3-minute break.
3-minute break. We'll start at 3 o'clock and
3:15.
start and come back at 3:15, back in
Is there a second?
I second.
session.
All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
My 6-year-old was trying to do the swim test.
Shut off your,
And you can't stop. Sorry. Walking alongside, I'm like, come on.
Makes